New video shows Israeli police clashing here with a crowd of mourners who appear to have been beaten with batons, actually causing the pallbearers to briefly drop Shireen's casket. So many allegations have been made since Shireen's death. Her network Al Jazeera accusing Israel of, quote, blatant murder, while the Israeli military now says it is investigating whether the fatal shot came from one of its soldiers. We brought you this story this week when witnesses came forward saying that the journalist was shot and killed by Israeli forces while covering a military raid on Wednesday in the occupied West Bank. Joining me now, award-winning Palestinian journalist and former professor of journalism at Princeton University, Daoud Kuttab, and president and CEO of Americans for Peace, now also a former IDF soldier, Hadar Susskind. We appreciate both of you so much for being here. Daoud, I want to start with you. You knew Shireen personally. Let's just start by talking about her work and her legacy.
You know, there are a lot of TV journalists who are quite emotional, but Shireen was one of the few journalists in the Arab world that was extremely unemotional. She presented the news, she presented the facts. She was always on the field. She only reported what she saw in her own eyes. And people really appreciated the facts that she was transmitting. She was really well known. She became a household. I mean, since 2000, almost every night she's on television. People saw her and became you know, and they were so happy to hear her, and they were so sad when she was killed in such a way. It was terrible.
So, Daoud, let me ask you, as a former Palestinian journalist covering Israeli-Palestinian tensions for so many years, did you ever feel that you were a target? And do you believe that, yes?
You know, look, the Israelis deal differently, obviously. You know, normally, if you're accredited, and only very few Palestinians are accredited, you have to work for an international agency to be accredited. Now, what happened to Shireen happened in the early morning hours of Wednesday in one of the furthest locations from the center of Palestine, Israel, in Jenin. So, and it also happened when the Israeli government said that they're removing all restrictions on the army. So the army basically was given a free hand. And when you have underarm or, you know, you have Israeli troops that are trying to do an operation, they see a camera, well, they want to get rid of it. And so in this case, it seems that they succeeded, unfortunately, by killing an icon, a really well-liked, loved icon, who was also an American citizen and who's a Palestinian Christian. So, you know, they unified Palestinians in a way that never has happened before. We saw tens of thousands of people in the old city today carrying her coffin, carrying Palestinian flags. And the Israelis tried to bring that down, and they couldn't stop the Palestinians from celebrating and, you know, remembering her life.
No, she clearly had many people around her who loved her very much. But I do want to clarify with you where you stand, Daoud. Do you believe that Shireen was targeted for being Palestinian?
Well, I think she was targeted for being a journalist. I'm not sure that she was targeted for being Palestinian. I think they didn't expect journalists to be there at 6 a.m. on Wednesday. And they shot first one of her assistants, and he ran away. And they apparently, because she didn't run away, she was killed. Did they want to kill her? Did they just want to scare her? We don't know. But clearly, she was killed by Israelis because they didn't want cameras to be around when they did the operation that they were doing.
And we should point out that an investigation has begun. Israeli military said they are investigating if indeed she was shot by an Israeli soldier. Hadar, as an Israeli American and former IDF combat soldier, what was your initial reaction to Shireen's death?
My initial reaction is that it's just a terrible tragedy. And, you know, it's a tragedy, obviously, first and foremost, her death for her family, for her friends, but really her voice and her work and the loss of that's been so important, as Daoud said, to the Palestinian people, to the Arab world. And, you know, it remains to be seen what kind of investigation will happen. You know, an Israeli cabinet minister himself said that they don't have tremendous credibility investigating their own work. So we are certainly calling for an independent investigation, and I hope that will be forthcoming.
So when you served with the IDF, had you ever known a Palestinian journalist to be targeted? And do you believe that the IDF could have purposely targeted Shireen for being either a Palestinian journalist or just a journalist?
Well, I certainly never had any personal experience like that. My service is quite some time ago already, and I never saw anything like that. Was she targeted? Was that intentional? I don't know. I will say again, I think that's why we need an investigation, and I think there's a question of what does it mean to be targeted as well. There's no doubt that the IDF doesn't want journalists filming these things, doesn't want cameras around their actions. As Daoud said, whether they intended to scare her off or intended to kill her, I don't know.
And Hadar, just to take a step back here, we're having this conversation because a Palestinian journalist and as a former IDF soldier, we have the two of you representing both sides here as an Israeli and a Palestinian. What does this tell you just about this moment and the larger implications of Shireen's death?
I think it is again, terrible and unfortunate reflection of the situation that we have right now and how fraught it is, how fraught that conflict is, and how fragile that, one action, whether it was intentional, as certainly many believe, or accidental, can be the match that sets things aflame. And frankly, the response today, the reason we're talking today, was not only her death on Wednesday, but the funeral today, and seeing the response from the Israeli police today. I don't know how anybody, including me, a former IDF soldier, can look at that and think that that's about Israel's security, or that is somehow about anything other than just violence.
Appreciate your transparency very much by saying that, Hadar. And Daoud, what do you think should happen now with this investigation? What do you want to see?
Well, I want to see an end to occupation, because really, whatever the reason was, the Israeli soldiers should not be in Jenin. They should not be in the West Bank. This is occupied areas. Normally, occupations last a few years. This has been a 50-some-year occupation, and it has to end. And things happen when there is a continued hostile occupation. People who resisted. We're all supporting the Ukrainians for resisting the Russians. Why isn't people also saying Palestinians have a right to live freely in their own country without an occupation? This is the real problem, and we need to stop trying to negate the nationalism of the other. The Palestinian flag is not illegal. Palestinians have a right to raise their flag, just like the Israelis have a right to raise their flags. We need a two-state solution. Otherwise, let's have a one-state, bi-national state. But to keep the status quo, keep Palestinians under occupation, is not going to resolve the problem.
Hadar, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki just spoke about Shireen's funeral. Let's take a listen to what she said.
This is a day where we should all be marking, including everyone there, the memory of a remarkable journalist who lost her life. We know that there is, with the disturbing footage from the funeral procession today in Jerusalem, we regret the intrusion into what should have been a peaceful procession. We've urged respect for the funeral procession, the mourners, and the family at this sensitive time. We're also in close touch with Israeli and Palestinian authorities, have been and obviously will continue to be, especially given the images we've seen today. We're not currently involved in any of the investigation, but we are working to bridge cooperation and available to provide assistance as needed.
What did you think of that response, Hadar, and what more is your organization asking should be done?
Well, I think the important sentence there was when the press secretary said that the U.S. is not currently involved, because they should be involved and they need to be involved. And we need to see, again, a credible, independent investigation. But also, I think what Daoud just said was incredibly important. This investigation, this issue, this incident is tragic and is important, but the issue on the table is 55 years of occupation. And that's where the government needs to be involved. And that's what my organization, Americans for Peace Now, is working for, is calling for. The U.S. government and governments going back, Democrats and Republicans, excepting the last administration, have all been opposed to the occupation. They've all been opposed to settlement expansion. They've all called for two-state solution. President Biden and this administration stands strongly by all of those things. We need to see them put action behind those words. We need to see them engage with the Israelis, engage with the Palestinians, engage with the international community to take real, meaningful steps to end this occupation and bring about that two-state solution.
Daoud Kuttab and Hadar Susskind, I really appreciate you both coming on together and having this discussion with me. Appreciate it very much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.